It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina, featuring industry outlooks, panel discussions on trending topics, and interviews with business executives, community leaders, and government officials. And now, coming to you from the Drum Creative Studio, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. We are up to episode number 32. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins, and as always, we are coming to you from the Drum Creative Studios. Today, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and the challenges that it presents if we are not careful and if we are not vigilant. Protecting ourselves and our companies from cyber attacks is one of the most important things that we can do, and if you are a business owner or if you are a technology officer, I bet from time to time you have lost sleep thinking about what might happen or what could happen. As technology advances, unfortunately, so does the ability of the hackers. And we're going to hear about some of that today. We need to be on the lookout for a lot of things when you're talking about cyber issues. Ransomware attacks, IoT attacks, AI attacks, phishing attacks, cryptocurrency attacks, anything and everything, the list goes on. Today, we're going to hear about a real-world challenge that thankfully was solved by a real-world solution, and these two guys here are going to help me have that conversation. First of all, Reed Wilson, the owner and the CEO at Palmetto Technology Group, or PTG, welcome.
Thank you.
And Clay Mardre, you are the president of I&M Industrials.
Yes, sir.
So I got that right?
That is right.
Clay, Reed, it's good to have you guys here.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well, I am sorry that we're here to have this conversation. However, I think everything turned out good, but I am looking forward to hearing about what happened and how it was fixed. But before we get into that, let's just set the stage a little bit. Now, I&M Industrials, and I want to make sure that I say it right, you guys are a supplier of air compressors, a compressed air solutions provider, and a consultant in that industry. And of course, Reed at PTG, you all are a technology solutions provider and provide all kinds, an array of services for folks. But let's start with you, Clay. Give me a little elevator speech briefly about what you do in your company.
Sure. So we, like you said, we sell and service air compressors, industrial air compressors. So manufacturers use compressed air as a utility. And we have service techs that go out and service those machines, sales guys that obviously sell them. And then we have a different side to our business. It's kind of more on the commodity side, solenoid valves, pressure gauges, switches, pumps, that kind of thing. So basically anything that has something to do with manufacturing,
Right.
compressed air side.
Got it. And Reed, you've been with us a couple times. Welcome back. Good to see you. Tell me about PTG.
Yeah, so PTG is an IT service provider. What's commonly called a managed service provider, an MSP. We primarily work with small and medium-sized businesses like Clay's, for example, just to help them make sure that their business is staying safe, secure, but more importantly, their employees are productive.
Right. Clay, how big is your company?
About 25 employees.
25 employees. Okay. I'm going to read some statistics here and just kind of bring the viewers and the listeners just, again, kind of set the stage a little bit. Cybercrime up 300% since COVID. I want to hear why you think that's the case since COVID here in a second. But a couple other statistics. A cyber attack occurs every 39 seconds. More than 800,000 people fall victim to cyber attacks each year. Companies lose more than $17,000 every minute due to phishing. Amazing. 17% of all data breaches involve malware infections, and more than 700 million ransomware attacks occurred just last year. And these cyber criminals, they don't mess around, right?
No, I had a leader, I think it was Larry Blackwell who said it. He was quoting, I think it was Willie Rivers, why do you rob the banks? And the answer is because that's where the money is, right? And
Because he could?
And because he could, right? And I think one of the reasons that we're seeing this skyrocket is because it works and it's highly profitable. It's up since COVID just because more and more folks are working from home, and typically they're not behind the corporate firewall. So some of the security measures that are in place are that they don't have those if they're working from home, obviously, versus working inside the office.
I never stopped to think about that. When I saw the statistic, I was just thinking, why would it be up so much? But it's because of remote work.
Yeah, well, a lot of folks are using their personal devices now too. It's pretty common. We see a ton of that going on, and so that's been really the primary driver is the work from home.
Lesson learned, right? For sure. Okay, Clay. So the challenge that occurred and the solution, thankfully, that occurred afterward, how long ago was this? Are we talking?
October of 21.
Okay, so this was a few years ago. So you've had time to recuperate a little, right, and think a lot about what happened. So let's just walk that through for a second. Now, before this happened, you already knew of Reed and PTG, though, correct?
That's right.
They were not your provider at the time, but you knew of them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a problem. Tell us about the problem.
So we come in one day, and all of our shared files that we have and our ERP software basically was shut down. Anytime somebody would try to go into a file in our documents log, it just basically said something to the effect of ransom. And so we immediately contacted our current IT provider, and they said, yes, you've been hit. And so, yeah, that's how it happened.
All right. So you come into work. Is this a Monday? It doesn't matter what day.
PTSD when I think about it. Yeah, it was probably a Monday. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's probably a Monday. You come in, horrible day now. Can you ever think that something like ransomware, that something like this could happen?
No, not the little old I&M Industrials, you know.
Right. Right. And so when did you know that this is a huge deal?
When we saw ransom on there, and then the IT provider that we had at the time said, "You've been hit with ransomware, and this is a big deal." It's about as scary as you could possibly think of. I'm thinking I'm losing my business at that point, you know.
Okay, and ransomware basically is what it says, right? The definition is what it says.
That's right.
Somebody was holding your information for ransom.
Right.
And how did they contact you?
So in the files that we it gave it basically, when you clicked into it, it gave you a way to contact them. We did not do that. We thankfully had some cyber insurance that we immediately contacted our insurance company, and they provided an attorney who specializes in this. They provided a negotiation firm, and then they provided an IT company that deals with this kind of stuff. And so we kind of just let them have it. They tapped into our servers on site, and they dealt with it. And luckily we had backups, but they were. It's not just as easy as flipping a switch, and Reed can probably attest to that. It's not just as easy as flipping a switch and you're back up and running. So we were down for a while.
How long?
About a week and a half, maybe even closer to 2 weeks.
So your first call was to your IT company. They confirm, yeah, man, you got a problem. Right. Your second call was to your insurance company, who hooks you up with some folks that you need to be hooked up with.
Exactly.
So, all right, I'm going to come back to you in a sec. Before we came on air, Reed, you said these guys were doing everything right.
That's right.
It's not like that there was some, they were like, oh, man, you shouldn't have done that. Let me slap you on the hand, see what happens. None of that was happening, right?
Correct, yeah. And we see that pretty commonly, right? Obviously the folks who aren't doing things right are a little bit more of a risk than the folks who are. But, what we say all the time, and it's the stuff that keeps me awake at night still inside my business is, we have to get everything right. And the folks who do this for a living only have to get one thing right. And, in Clay's scenario, it was an unpatched device that somebody got a hold of, and Clay and team obviously couldn't have known that.
I'm sorry, one sec. You said it was what kind of device?
It was unpatched software. Now that's not the most common. The most common way people get in is through remote desktop or just simply through phishing. And you made an interesting point that I think your listeners may be interested in hearing is we typically see these things happen over the weekend. Or over long weekends or holiday weekends. If you remember the big ransomware incident that happened, I think it was July of 21, that shut down all the gas availability on the East Coast. That happened over July 4th weekend. And so, we always tell our customers, if you're gone for the weekend, if it's going to be a holiday weekend, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, those are really good times for the bad guys to do their work because, typically folks aren't working then. And so they can operate a little more freely.
Right. All right. So, Clay, keep walking me through this. At some point, you reached out to this guy. How did that occur?
So we had to get through the process of trying to get back up and running. And then when that happened, we were okay for a while. And then I contacted Reed at PTG and said, all right, I can't deal with this. I need to fix this. Tell me what to do.
You've got someone that is touching base with the folks who are keeping your information,
Correct,
holding it for ransom.
Correct.
Right. Somebody else is doing it. You're not doing it.
Right.
And I would assume that they're communicating back with you saying, they said this, they said this. What does that conversation look like? First of all, do you know where they were from?
We were told they were from overseas. I want to say it was Russia. I'm not exactly sure, but that's where they were. They said.
Okay.
But the conversation was something to the effect of, we've got all their information. If they'll pay us this amount of money, we will let it go. And then, the negotiators are like, they always say this. They're even if you decided to pay, which we would have. Chances are they're going to try to keep it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
how did it resolve itself? How did you get your information?
We had, like I said, we had backups. So we had on-site servers at that time, and we had backups. We ran them every day. Our IT provider at the time did, and I think we lost maybe like 2 days of it. Mm-hmm. And when we finally got everything back up and running, they had to clean everything up first. They tried to get, the guys out of our servers. They're still tapped into our servers. That's way above my pay grade, so I don't know how that works. But once they cleaned the servers and did everything they needed to do, they put the backups in place, which is why it took so long for us to be down. And then,
right. So at that point, you've got your information back. It was from your own backups, but you got somebody still saying, if you don't pay me, I'm going to do something with this information.
Right.
So now you're in a tough spot. How does that? What happens right then?
It's a very tough spot. Yes, it's just one of those things where you kind of have to call their bluff.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Truly. I mean, it's something. And I kind of had conversations with myself and other people in my company and said, what are they going to do with that? Because it was basically just customer files on the equipment that we service, right, or that kind of thing. It really wasn't any kind of accounting information that would have been that they could have gotten a hold of.
Did you reach out to customers?
Yeah, we had to just to let them know that while we were down and what was happening, and thankfully they were all extremely understanding, and a lot of them wanted to know how they could help. So it was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
At some point now, you've gotten this behind you to some degree, and you realize you need to make a change with your provider.
Right.
You reach out to Reed, and so Reed, you come in, and what does your team do? What does this look like now?
Well, look, I'm thinking a couple of things. Just if I could maybe expand on a couple of Clay's points. Having the right insurance is really critical. It's not uncommon for these folks to have attorneys on retainer, negotiators on retainer, and then incident response folks on retainer. Those are the folks that come in and kind of do the after action cleanup. We're not in that business. I wouldn't want to be in that business. It's a high stress 24/7. You never get a break kind of business. So I think my advice to your listeners first and foremost would be make sure you've got really good coverage. And we always say, nothing against local insurance folks, vet what the coverage actually covers, because we've seen too many times where, it's a small rider on an existing policy of some sort, and it is a drop in the bucket from what your total costs are going to be. And then our policy going forward is we want to try to get as much out of the on-premises infrastructure, no on-premises servers, try to get all that to the cloud, shift that responsibility over to an Amazon or a Google or a Microsoft. We're a Microsoft shop. Specifically email, that's a really critical one. Get that up into a third party, transfer the risk to them as much as you can. Now, that's still a shared risk model. So, while the back end infrastructure is maintained by the hoster, you're still responsible for the security of your account. So we've talked about this before. Good multi-factor authentication on every account to keep the bad guys out. Making sure you have a good backup policy. Understanding how long it will take you to put your backups in place, I think, is really critical. Most folks just say when they talk to their IT company, and look, we have customers that are guilty of this too. They don't want to talk about, well, how long does it actually take us to get the data back? Because that, even if you've got good backups, that can be, several hours to several days to several weeks, depending upon, the age of the system. A really bad example that we walked into one time was not a customer of ours. We got called in on it. Was they were running an old ERP that was made in like 2005 or 2006, and so the software's not even available anymore. So think about, if I'm running an old ERP, how am I even going to get access to the license to be able to reinstall this thing? At the end of the day, we've got security parameters that we recommend to every customer. We have some basics, and then we have some more advanced things too. Nobody really wants to do the advanced things until after there's been an attack, unfortunately, and at that point it's kind of hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube. The number one thing, and I think I've actually mentioned this on the show before, is if you got $10 to spend on in your IT security budget, I would spend none on training, right? Because most of these attacks that we see are because somebody clicks on something they shouldn't click on. They don't secure an account with multi-factor authentication. We can't control the software that folks are running inside their businesses, so those style attacks are always going to happen. But the vast majority of these are related to just an end user not paying attention. And then when they do maybe do something they should, there's a certain amount of shame that's associated with that. And so maybe they go quiet about it instead of saying, hey, I did this thing. And so just creating a culture inside your environment that we are security first. There's going to be mistakes. Bad things are going to happen, but let's just be open about those so we can get in front of them very, very quickly.
To be clear, that is not what happened in this circumstance.
No, correct.
This was not a lack of training issue, even though I'm sure training occurred after the fact, right?
Yeah.
But this particular thing wasn't about lack of training. It wasn't about someone doing something specifically that they should not have done.
Correct.
It was just one of those things that happened.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So you come in and just kind of walk me through those initial conversations about what needed to happen.
Yeah, so whenever we start working with a customer or potential customer the first time, we always just do an assessment of what they've got. And so in Clay's scenario specifically, we just saw that there was a pretty large footprint of on-premises servers. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But our recommendation was let's get as much of this out of the server closet as possible. So that was step one. Step two was putting some advanced security measures in place around their desktops and laptops. Step three was securing their Office 365 or Microsoft 365 environment as best we could. There's varying levels of licensing that I won't get into here because it's super boring, but basics is always put that MFA. And then the fourth thing that we did is we have an ongoing security awareness training that our customers can subscribe to. It sounds more onerous than it is. It's basically 1 hour of training for every new hire. It's all done online, self-facilitated, and then they get an email every week that's about a 2-minute training clip. And what's cool about that is it gives you kind of a score for that employee, almost like a credit score, that can show you who are your folks that are taking training seriously inside your business versus those who maybe aren't. Again, I think Clay is way out in front here because he made the decision, look, let's get as much of this into the cloud as possible. And that was really, I think, kind of the cornerstone for I'd hate to say keeping something like this from happening because who knows, a cloud provider could certainly be compromised as well. But we wish more customers would think like Clay and say, how can I get this technology out of my server closet and into a third party? Last thing I'll say on that is sometimes people think, well, if I get it to a server in the cloud or get it to a third party's, there's less for me to manage. We actually found the opposite to be true. If we look at the hours that we spend in a customer that's pure cloud versus a customer that's hybrid or a customer that's all on-prem, we actually spend about 20 to 30% more time in the cloud environments. And the reason for that is if you think about when you're on-prem, everything is behind a firewall. It's a little easier to integrate. When you've got 3 or 4 different cloud systems, Now the edge is the internet. So anybody that has public access to the internet can now get to these production systems, and the integration efforts are a little bit greater. So it's a misnomer, I think, often to think, well, going to the cloud is going to be cheaper or easier because, we've got data that says that's not really true.
Yeah, I understand. Clay, I'm sure, like we talked about in the beginning, this was probably a week or two of some really tough times. But as the dust began to settle, you brought Reed in and his group came in. How do you feel now about things moving forward?
I feel obviously a ton better. He basically, we had a conversation and said, this is not going to be cheap to do this, but it's the right thing to do. And at that point, all I could think about is it happening again.
Yeah, right.
And so I said, basically to the effect, I don't care what it costs. I just want to get it right so that,
never have to think about it.
I don't have to think about this. I don't want to, that's what the guy that Joseph that called on me the first time. And he said, what do you think about with IT? I don't want to think about IT. I want to think about selling air compressors and servicing them and my business. I want you to handle the IT so that I don't have to worry about it. So,
yeah. You talk about investment, and I'm sure it probably was an investment that made you go, ouch. There's no doubt about that. Sure. But it's also, like you say, probably the right thing to do.
Right.
Do you feel secure now, as much as one can be?
Yes.
And Reed, let me ask you too. Can he feel secure now, as much as one can be?
I think that's the qualifier, right?
Right.
I mean, I can tell you that of all of our customers, again, these folks are leading from the front. We hope this never happens to anybody. We certainly hope it doesn't happen to Clay again. But as I said earlier, right, like we've got to get everything right. The bad guys only have to get one thing right. Right. And so, as business owners here, this is all a game of risk. And so how do you balance the revenue and obviously the cost impact of doing something like this? Again, I think just working with a good IT company, but more importantly, having a great insurance policy so that if bad things do happen, you've got the right folks helping you, and then really understanding what your incident response policy is. And I get frustrated about this because people think it's an IT function. This is not an IT function. We have no idea how you ring the cash register inside your business. Yeah. And so being really thoughtful around, if my systems don't work, how am I still going to ring the cash register? That's really a function of the business and not a function of technology. Can we help with that? For sure. But I can't tell you how many times we've had customers come and say, can you create the incident response policy for us? And our response to that is, we can help, but at the end of the day, you as the customer, you have to own that.
Exactly. I'm going to get you both out of here on this last question, one for each of you, and I want them both to be pieces of advice. And Clay, I'm going to start with you. You're talking to business owners. We have a whole lot of them that watch and listen. What would you tell a business owner that may not be thinking too much about what you went through, and you didn't know you needed to think about it yourself, probably to the degree that you did? Advice for those guys.
It can happen to you, no matter how big, small you are. It can happen to you. And it's one of the worst feelings that you can possibly think of.
Yeah.
Concerning your business, obviously. But yeah, it's they don't care who you are, how big you are, how small you are. If they can find an in, they're going to take it.
Right.
So it's definitely something. And even though we've switched over to PTG and has been fantastic since then, we've increased our cyber insurance probably tenfold. Just because I just want to have that safety.
Just help you sleep at night.
That's right.
Yeah, right. And Reed, last thing for you. For all these companies that are small and medium, they have IT providers, they have folks like PTG that work for them. Do you have advice for them on what they should expect from those types of providers who do what you do? I mean, what are the types of things they should be having conversations with their provider?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, I think, because, so much of our industry is 3 and 5 and 10 person orgs, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I think the most important thing you can do as a business owner is make sure you are connecting with your IT company on a regular basis, about what's going on inside the business. And I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Taking their recommendations very seriously.
Right.
I mean, there's certainly some fear, uncertainty, and doubt selling that goes on. We try not to do that, but so many folks think, well, this won't happen to me, and then it does. And so, just staying in constant communication with your IAT provider and really digging into what their recommendations are. We hear from customers all the time, or prospects all the time, and say, I don't know the last time I actually sat down with the sales team or the account team or the service team. And so those regular cadences are really critical.
That's good stuff, guys. I hate that this happened to you, but I really enjoyed hearing about it. Enjoy might not be the best word to use, but it's such a good reminder, and it's a real eye-opener. And I really appreciate you coming and sharing the story, and of course, Reed, for tagging along.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you both. Oh, gosh. You bet. Folks, that concludes another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina. That is Reed Wilson, CEO, owner, PTG, Palmetto Technology Group, and Clay Mardre, president of I&M Industrials. We'll see you next time.